Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, everybody, to the Women Connected in Wisdom podcast. If you are with us live today, you can already tell that we have a guest host today. So we're going to
Hello.
jump right into introductions and then we will kick off this conversation. So, my friend, colleague, Sacil Armstrong is our guest host today. Before you introduce yourself, I just want to give warm shout outs to Shannon. We're calling your name,
Hey,
Shannon. She's a
Shannon.
little under the weather today, so she will be back with us next week. And we miss you, my friend. So, Cecile and I do a podcast on Mondays,
Mm-hmm.
previously called Playing with
Playing with
Possibilities,
possibilities.
but now going to be called The Everyday Activist. You want to introduce yourself, Cecile, and what you do and who you are?
Sure. All right, thank you. My name is Sacil Armstrong. My pronouns are she, her. I am streaming to you live today from the land of the Kickitan, the unceded land of the Kickitan, now known as Newport News, Virginia. I'm an embodied activist, and so I'm all about getting in your body and doing something to make the world better. I'm the founder of Inspired by Indigo, soon to be called Everyday Activism, where I teach people how to let go of blame, shame, and guilt, get in your body, know your facts, and then get out and undo the work. Go out and do something that's going to change the world for the better. And then the last step that people like to forget is to rest. Rest your body and your mind and your spirit and celebrate your wins. And by doing these 4 steps over and over and over, you can make social equity a habit. So it's not something that you have to gear yourself up to.
Mm,
It's something
I
that you
love
just
it.
do. Thank you.
Thank you for your work in the world. Hey, y'all, I'm
Mhm.
Christine Gautreaux, a white social justice advocate, an international speaker, coach, best-selling Amazon author, and a dancing social worker who helps you upgrade yourself and your community care. And together, including Cecile, because she's one of those Amazon best-selling authors, we are Women Connected in Wisdom podcast, a podcast grounded in the 8 dimensions of wellness. And we like to get together every week for intentional conversations about how to be wise in business and relationships and wellness. So,
Mhm.
Cecile, thank you for joining me. And I know it was a little last minute. And
That's
thank you for
okay. You know I'm here for you.
thank you for saying yes. And today we are talking about social wellness, which is actually the chapter you wrote in the book, which is
Yeah, I was
so
going to say
cool.
that's right in my wheelhouse. Yep.
Right? And so I want to read that definition and then us check in before we bring our guest up today. But I'm really
Okay.
excited to have this conversation because today we're going to be talking about harnessing the power of conflict. And
Ooh.
so, right?
You
Especially
know that's something I like.
I know, right? So, social wellness, just to give our listeners the definition that we're working from, social wellness is about the ability to nurture ourselves, others, and our relationships with healthy boundaries. It includes balancing the other 7 dimensions of wellness and actively participating as an interdependent being in the web of life. So,
That's a
whew,
lot.
it's a lot, right?
Mhm.
But when I think about harnessing conflict, what pops out of me about that is that healthy boundaries. So I can't wait
Mhm.
to see what our guest has to say.
Yeah.
Usually we stop and we say, "How are you?"
Mhm.
I don't know if you want me to ask you that today.
I am present and I am in my body. So,
Oh, that is a great way to start, right?
mhm.
Yeah. I would say the same thing too. I started this morning with a 2-mile walk at
Mhm.
the local park once the rain broke, and it was so needed
Oh,
to
yeah.
just be outside, get a little bit of sunshine, and
Mhm.
yeah,
We
because
didn't have any sun here today. It's been raining all day. I didn't get all my steps in, but I walked a little bit in the rain just because I needed a break. But I
good
have been
job,
like moving it, something has been happening ever since I woke up today.
right? Dancing
Mhm.
fast, right?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Well, I am delighted to introduce our next guest. And if you're ready, I'm going to go ahead and introduce her and get her up on
Yeah.
stage because I think we're going to have an incredible conversation today.
I'm
So,
ready for it.
all right, let's do it. So, Shannon Felder helps leaders develop peaceful, collaborative relationships so they can fulfill their vision maximize their potential, and enjoy the journey. Mm.
Mm.
Right? Her unique approach to conflict management was cultivated through her experience over more than 2 decades as an attorney, organizational leader, and coach. Shannon empowers those who work with her to develop the conflict confident mindset,
Oh, I like that.
diffuse unhealthy conflict, and create a culture where unhealthy conflict is minimized while healthy conflict is embraced as a tool for growth. I am so
Ooh.
delighted to welcome Shannon L. Felder to our stage and to have this conversation.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank
I'm
you
so
so
excited to
much
be
for
here.
being here.
Absolutely.
We were talking ahead of the show about where we're all from because we were all
Mhm.
raised in the South,
Mm-hmm.
Right.
and about just a little bit about even the word conflict and what we're taught, right, as Southern
Mm-hmm.
women, and what a
Right.
lot of women are taught about
Mhm.
conflict. So I'd love for each of y'all to say kind of how you were raised and what you were taught about it before we dive into your work, Shannon, and how we do it now.
Mm. I'm gonna let our guest go first.
Okay. So, like you said, I have lived in the South all my life.
Mm-hmm.
I am a preacher's daughter. I'm also a preacher's wife. I was a glutton for punishment. Um, um, and so, the odd thing for me is, although I had a lot of the societal expectations when it came to conflict within my
Mhm.
household, conflict was fun. Um,
Mm.
we did things like, instead of my parents punishing us when we did something wrong, we would hold family court and we would get to argue our cases, and we would have a jury of our peers, and so it was different because I kind of had this dual relationship with conflict, because outside the confines of my immediate family and my support system, you had these societal expectations
Mm-hmm.
that are connected to gender, that are connected, sometimes to age dynamics, that you experience, that sometimes are connected with church,
Mhm.
especially in the South. But then within my immediate circle, I just had a different relationship with conflict.
Oh, no wonder you became a lawyer. I love that family court. That's
Right.
ridiculously funny. Now, what about you, Cecile? What was your experience growing up?
I had different messages within my household. I've got some people in my household who are seriously conflict avoidant. And so anytime there was anything, they would like basically run from it. And then I have other people in my household who, or had other people in my household who, um, just went for it. They're just like, oh, there's a disagreement. We're going to talk about it. And so there's one
Mhm.
person who's like, I'm ready to talk. And then there's another person who's like, nope, nope, everything's good. I just want to pretend like, like everything's good. So in my household, I had like two conflicting ways of handling conflict.
Right.
And so that's what I grew up with. And now I ended up being somewhere in the middle. I want to address it, but I want to hold space for the other person at the same time. And so I was like in the middle.
Right. I
Yeah.
was telling Shannon before the show, I met a colleague probably about 10 years ago. And this is before I really got intentional about my racial justice work and social justice work. And
Hmm.
at that time, I was very conflict avoidant. And I was raised to be conflict avoidant. That whole thing about, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. And
Mm.
um, and never question authority, because both my parents were public school teachers. And so
Oh wow.
that whole, and so when I met this colleague, she loved conflict. And she said to me, "Oh, you're conflict avoidant." And I was like, "Oh, isn't everybody?" I've since learned that no, not everybody is conflict avoidant,
Right.
and I've learned more tools. But I can't wait to have this conversation with you today, Shannon, like about how do we harness it? Like how is it a positive thing, and that
Hmm.
we can quit avoiding it? Because we know, I mean, Cecile's work, my work now, like we can't avoid conflict, like especially if
Right.
we're going to make systemic change and if we're going
Right.
to address
Absolutely.
some things that are really wrong, we have
Mhm.
to be able to harness it. So
Mhm.
give us all your wisdom, Shannon.
Well, I mean, the first thing that you have to have is you have to have a mindset shift. Um, Most of us, whether we avoid conflict, we have people that are conflict avoidant, and then we also have people who are conflict explosive, right?
Mhm.
Um, and that's not a positive thing either. You have some people that just argue for the sake of argument. They use it as a tool. My daughter would say they bully people
Mhm.
Mhm.
and create conflict. And no extreme is healthy. You have to have harmony, you have to have that balance. And so the first thing you have to do is you have to change your mindset about conflict. And you have to stop fearing it and start embracing it. And the reason I love to say like harnessing the power of conflict is because I think of conflict like energy or like fire. And science is not my strength, but I do remember learning this thing about the law of conservation of energy, right? The energy is neither gained nor lost, it's only transferred. And when you
Mhm.
think about conflict in that manner, you begin to realize like I can use this energy to create something positive and beneficial, or I can allow it to build up, become toxic, become destructive. And that's what
Mhm.
so many of us have experienced. And
Mhm.
that's why we dislike conflict. And my observation and my experience is when we say we're conflict avoidant, we're really not, because it's impossible to be conflict
Right.
avoidant. What you're actually doing is you are making the choice to avoid external conflict, but you're trading it for internal conflict,
Ooh, yes.
right?
So
And
Mhm.
true.
so when you have this internal conflict because you've decided to avoid that difficult conversation, you've decided not to amplify your voice, you take two extremes. Sometimes both, right? When you read the body keeps the score, all these other things, a lot of us,
Mhm.
because we have all this bottled up conflict, it's the tension we feel, it's the blood
Mhm.
pressure, it's the health issues that we're experiencing, because we're not being authentic to who we are.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Because if you ask me, do I like something, and I say yes when I really don't, that's a lack of authenticity, and I'm
Mhm.
betraying myself, and I feel that dissonance. I feel that internal conflict, and that energy that's going to manifest in some form. And then the other
Mhm.
thing that we do is we displace it, right? So I'm really mad because we had this conflict at work and I didn't say anything. I just acted like everything was okay. But now that I'm home, I'm mean to my children, I'm
Mhm.
short patient with my
Mhm.
spouse. We're transferring that energy, it's just displaced.
Mhm.
And so when we talk about harnessing the power of conflict, what you're really doing is you're saying, I am going to be intentional about where and how I use this power that I have, which is my voice.
Mhm.
Um, One of my favorite quotes is, when everyone thinks alike, no one's thinking much, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Like
Right?
that. Yep.
So if everybody is agreeing all the time, then there's a lot of internal conflict beneath the surface. And there's a reason that you can't tap into it. And so when you harness the power of conflict, what you actually do is you say, hey, I don't expect people to agree with me. I expect to grow through the process of disagreement. I expect to grow through the process of dissatisfaction. And so I can embrace conflict as a tool for me to grow instead of me fearing conflict because, as we've already talked about, I have so much conflict baggage,
Mhm.
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
We just,
Mhm.
no one taught us how to do this the right way.
That's true.
Right?
That's true. I'm
And
finding
so,
that a lot of the things that we talk about now, especially when it comes to communication and relationships, are things that we just weren't taught. And now
right,
people are learning that these things are not just things that happen. They are skills and you can learn them.
right.
Mhm.
And it's amazing because at the root of conflict confidence, at the root of conflict mastery, is comfort being your authentic self
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
and putting
Mm-hmm.
yourself in spaces where your authentic self is valued.
Mhm.
And
Mm-hmm.
you know, one of the things I tell people, and I know this is said so many times in the sphere of self-care, you teach people how to value you.
Mhm.
It's true.
So when it comes to conflict, when I say putting yourself in environments that value who you are and value your voice, you have to take an active role in creating that environment. Um,
Oh, I
Yeah.
100% agree with you that, Shannon.
Mhm.
Like that authenticity piece, the knowing who you are. Like, because
mhm,
I think what happens with a lot of women sometimes is they're so invested in pleasing other people that they lose
Mhm.
themselves sometimes and they
right,
don't
Mhm.
know who they are to even have that authenticity. So I think that
Mhm.
knowing who you are, the valuing yourself and putting yourself in places where other people value you is huge. Not always
Yeah.
easy, but huge.
right.
Mhm.
But
So
Mhm.
it's not easy, but it's worth the work. It's
right?
always
Oh, it's
worth the
definitely
work.
worth it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Absolutely. So how do you teach people to do that? Like, how do you teach people, say somebody who weren't taught the skills, to Cecile's point, about how
Mhm.
do you even start being able to use your voice and stand up for yourself?
Right. So I spend a lot of time with my clients initially, and I work primarily with leaders, right? So just being transparent, when people come to me, they usually have problems with their team. And so when people come to me, it is very much like, Shannon, help me fix them, right? So like,
Mhm.
so you know, the first thing that we have to do is we have to change it from fix them to help me fix me. And so we really do a lot of deep work into how do you feel about conflict and why do you feel that way? Um, because most of my clients, there's this disconnect between who they want to be in
Mhm.
conflict and how they present themselves. And
Yeah.
I think one of the problems with using this is like, teach me how to do it, is that can be inauthentic as well, right? Um, I can't teach you how to do conflict until I make sure that you are comfortable being yourself in conflict. So we spend a lot of time just dealing with that. Like I said, that mindset, making those mindset shifts, looking at why do I feel the way I feel about conflict, and how can I reverse engineer my perspective. Okay,
Right.
so we start there, and then kind of after we work through that, now you are comfortable with conflict. You're comfortable being your authentic self. So now you're in a good position to start engaging with other people. And most of the time, when people come to me, they've got some toxic conflict going on. Now you're empowered to diffuse that, because you're bringing a, you know, one of the things I tell my leaders is, if you want other people that, you know, if you want your colleagues and your team to be comfortable with something, you've got to be confident with it. Your level has to be above that you expect of your team. So
Mhm.
you can't want them to deal with toxicity and unhealthy conflict when you're scared and you're nervous and you're, you know, oh, I really don't want to address this, right? So we've got to get that leader to a place of empowerment, and then that leader goes in and is able to diffuse that conflict. And then once you get rid of the toxicity, right, the final step is to create an environment where there is healthy conflict. Um,
So for our leaders, for our
mhm,
listeners, leaders
mhm,
and listeners, because we have
sure.
both, what is healthy conflict? When you think about those words,
Mhm.
what are you thinking about, Shannon?
So I like to call it productive disagreement. Okay. Um, everyone has a different perspective. It's formulated by our background, by our experiences, even within an organization, our position, right? Just to give
Mhm.
you a basic example, you know, the financial person, the accountant, the CFO, has a totally different perspective than the service provider, right? But we need both, right? Because the service provider just wants to do all this great stuff and the sky's the limit, right? But you have to be accountable to your donors. You have to be accountable to, your board or your stockholders, depending on, what type of organization you have. We need these perspectives to bounce off of one another so that we can come out with the best thing that balances everyone's interests and make sure that everyone's needs are met. So if you have an environment where someone has a contribution based on their perspective, but for some reason they won't put it on the table, then your organization is operating with catastrophic blind spots. And that is the opposite of healthy. Healthy conflict is when everyone is coming, bringing their perspective, and we are really hashing it out. And when we leave that conversation, when we leave that meeting, when we leave that planning session, we didn't all agree. We all had different perspectives, but we are confident that what we came up with balanced everyone's needs and interests and is the best thing that we could do for everyone involved. And then we have the buy-in that we need for everyone to really rally behind it and move forward. Okay, so that's what healthy conflict looks like. That's what healthy conflict feels like. It feels like it may not have gone exactly the way I wanted it to go, but my voice was heard, my voice was valued, and I understand how we're balancing this and we can get behind it, right? One of the things I laugh at a lot of times is like you'll have executive leadership and they'll come up with these great ideas, but the ideas have to be implemented by the boots on the ground. And the people that have to implement this idea didn't have a seat at the table. And now there's all this, that's not going to work. How much money do we lose? Just doing things that if we really thought about it, it doesn't make sense, right? I want to hear from everyone. I want to get perspectives. I don't want you to agree with me. I need you to help me see my blind spots. I need you to think about what I'm not thinking about and what I wouldn't think about because of my position or my experience. And that is the key to healthy conflict. Now, that takes work, right? Because as we talked about, there are power dynamics in place, right? We all have this personal history that we bring to the table. I was dealing with someone last week, in fact, in an organization where I hold a leadership position. And, I reached out to the person and I said, listen, I know that you may have been in some environments where you didn't want to tell your leader certain things because you thought it would be mishandled or misappropriated. It might be considered a weakness. Like if you have something personal going on that's affecting your productivity in the organization, it was never let them see you sweat. And I said, listen, as your leader, part of my responsibility is to help you be the best that you can be for this team. And what happens to you outside of this environment impacts you inside of this environment. So it's never a sign of weakness for you to trust me, because my job is to support you and empower you to be the best person you can be here. And the person said to me, that's not my experience. I was berated. I felt like I might have been overlooked for advancement in an organization if she's not strong enough. All of those types of things. And so I had to kind of disband all of that history to get that relationship in place so that I can be effective in assisting that person, right? And that's what I think a lot of leaders are missing, is knowing how to bring people together, how to gain their trust, and then once you gain it, how not to misappropriate it, so that people feel like they can disagree with you, right? Like if I disagree with you, is it going to be appreciated or is it going to result in passive aggression? Is it going to result in water cooler and parking lot talk about me? Am I going to be seen as a quote unquote difficult team member? So you really have to, you got to cultivate that environment.
Yeah, thank you so much. I know you have a question, Sacil, but Kimberly is listening and she said, that's good. So thanks for listening, Kimberly. And we're glad you're here today. What you got for us, Cecile?
My question is, I've been working with a group who is focusing on consensus building, and this sounds a lot like that, but it seems like it might be a little bit different. So what's the difference between the healthy conflict and consensus building?
So, consensus building can kind of be it's very similar, okay? But
Okay.
consensus building can kind of be situational,
Okay.
okay? But when we talk about a healthy conflict culture, we're talking more about a working team dynamic on an ongoing basis, okay?
Okay.
So we can develop consensus around the issue, but
Mhm.
not have harmony as a group.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. Thank you.
Absolutely.
I want to pull up Kimberly's comment because I think, this is a reality that some people are
Mhm.
really afraid to speak up because of retaliation.
Right,
Um,
right.
and what do you say to somebody that's been their experience or that's their fear?
So, first of all, I think that trust is a dynamic process, right? So I tell people that you grow in your trust of a person, in your trust of a team. And so I think that you do things to build to a point of conflict confidence within an organization. And so you disagree meaningfully, like not just to be disagreeable, right? And then you look at how that is handled, and that honestly is one of the reasons that I really focus on dealing with leaders, because there are leaders who say they want this dynamic, collaborative environment, but because of their personal relationship with conflict, they're doing things that are destructive to the environment that they say they want, right?
Mhm.
And so that leader has to be aware. Like, I actually work with my clients on saying, okay, when someone disagrees with you, here are your after actions. Because you have to be intentional about reassuring that person that you're not going to retaliate,
Mhm.
that they're not going to be met with passive aggressive, backlash, right? So there are things that there are after actions that you have to take that can facilitate that deep level of trust. That, you know what, when I disagreed with my leader, the relationship didn't change. In fact, it got stronger. And then that builds that trust the more. But I do a lot, like, as leaders, why do we retaliate? We don't retaliate because of what they did or what they said. Our need to retaliate is personal. It's our insecurity. It's our fear. And when we really get to the root of that, then, like I said, when you get to the authentic you, it becomes easy to do this stuff.
Right? I love that. I love that. And yes, Christine Singleton is listening and said, "This is good stuff." Absolutely, it is. Yeah. I want to, and I think you've addressed it in some ways, but I want to get real specific if we can around when you talk about harnessing it. When you
Mhm,
talk about, so how do you, I mean, I think about conflict situations I've been in. Cecile and I do a lot of embodied work, right? So you
mhm,
often feel it in your body, and we often teach people how to release it from their body, right? Not how to
right?
harness it, but how to like let it go through them and be resolved. So I want to talk a little bit about that, about when you think about harnessing it, what are you
Mhm.
thinking?
So I'm going to deal with it on two levels. I'm going to deal with it on the individual level, and then I'm going to deal with it on the leadership level. Okay. So on the individual level, very similar to what you've already said, I tell people, you know, take what I call a pregnant pause, do some breathing, do some whatever you need to do. And after you've kind of paused, then do a self check and see if you can release it. Because sometimes, in that moment, it seems like a big deal, but when you actually kind of decompress, you're like, you know what? That was me. I'm just tired. I'm irritable. And you're able to let it go. Okay. If you are not able to let it go, you have to make a commitment to process it. And processing it starts with introspection, right? So I have to really deal with me first. Like, why do I feel this way? Why does this bother me? Um, and I've got to eliminate all of my, all of my stuff, right? Just to give you an example, when my husband and I first got married, um, there was like a trigger word that I didn't know was a trigger for me. Okay. Being a bossy or controlling woman was just thrown around like it was the worst thing ever in some environments where I was. And so that was a trigger for me, right? For my husband to say, you need to stop being so bossy. Like that took me to a place that had nothing to do with him. Right? So I had to be introspective enough to realize that's my trigger. That's not that's not him. He's not saying that from a mean-spirited place or a derogatory place. I'm responding to it as strongly as I am because that's me, right? So after you've done the introspection and you've made sure that you deal with you, then you need to confront, right? But confrontation is not a bad thing. It's not, right? When you come to a confrontation having already processed all your internal stuff, you're able to address the situation and not have all this emotional baggage firing off and interrupting you addressing the issue. So I think, I always tell people, pause, release it. If you can't release it, you owe it to yourself to process it internally first, and then to go to the person and process it externally. Um, at a leadership level, it means I have to be intentional about creating opportunities for people to disagree with me safely. Right?
Like creating the environment and the culture.
Yeah, and the space,
right?
Right? It can be as simple as one of the things I work with my leaders on is how to ask questions, right? Because we ask questions in meetings and in group spaces that are actually conclusions. Don't you all think that's a great idea? Okay, what am I supposed to say? Like,
no, it's the worst idea I've heard all week, right?
Like you're putting me in an environment where you've already told me your presumption is that your idea is great. And now that makes me feel like in order to perfect your idea, I'm attacking you. So it can be something as simple as saying, okay, guys, here's my idea. What are the weaknesses in this idea? How can we improve this idea? That is not intimidating. That's inviting. That's saying to me, I need you all to disagree with me because I know that I'm not, omniscient. I don't know everything. And just those little shifts can make huge differences in your team dynamic. You know, I'm big on training people on how to do meetings well, right? We don't give people information in advance and then we want them to respond to it. So you come into a meeting and it's like, okay, so here's the new direction that we're going to take the company. And you talk for 15 minutes and then you say, what are your thoughts? Like, what do you mean? What are my thoughts? I'm still trying to process all of that information. Right.
Yeah,
So
that's an organizational thing for real. I'm working with an organization right now who is actually recognizing all of that, and we're trying to set up some systems to do better and give people a chance to like process things and come back to it. Because I'm like, you can't ask me something and then ask me for my opinion when I didn't have a chance to think about it. Because I'm not going to think of what I want to ask until a day later.
right,
Or
but
your
here's the
vote.
reality. Right.
Oh
But here's the
yeah, a
reality.
vote.
Yeah, exactly. Here's the reality, right? Historically speaking, when you go back and you look like during the Industrial Revolution, most organizations really didn't want the opinions.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of these systems are designed to deny you the opportunity to respond and just get you to do a quick head nod and be compliant.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to revisit a lot of what we do, and acknowledge that it's not even designed to allow people to express disagreement. It is designed to get you to nod your head blindly and, do what I said.
Right.
And that and look, that's not working anymore. Let's just put that
Mm-mm.
out there on the table.
Thank you.
Nope.
That's not working anymore. I tell people, everyone was like, "Oh, what's going on with the great resignation and what's going on?" I was like, "Look," and all this quiet quitting. I'm like, "Y'all stop. Y'all have been quiet firing for decades." Like, so the fact that now
Right?
people the fact that now people are saying, "I just refuse to spend 8 hours." Okay, I spend 8 hours at work, I spend 8 hours asleep, and I spend 8 hours trying to live life. Like, I'm no longer willing to give a third of my existence to misery. And I choose an environment that is more conducive to who I am as an individual. So, I mean, we
Mhm.
got we got to stop getting mad at people for doing what they should have been doing anyways.
For real.
Right.
For real.
Speak it. That is some truth there. Kimberly gave you some props earlier, and I'm just going to put them up here because that was a good time to put those up there. Um, I love this conversation because what I'm hearing you say is that when we create environments, when we create cultures where people can disagree, that's where the real work happens. And that's where we have cultural shift and change and systemic change, which Cecile and I know that to be true with our work as
Right.
social activists. And
Mhm.
that's easier said than done sometimes, right?
Ooh, yeah.
It is.
Mhm.
It is. It is. One of the things that concerns me the most, um, with our society today is we vilify people who think differently than we do. And when you go to a level of making character assumptions about someone because they disagree with you, then that becomes an impediment to you engaging in healthy conflict, because you've already made up your mind that that person is inherently bad or that that person is wrong. And it puts us in positions where we cannot do the work that we need to do. Um, one of the things I tell all of my clients is when you're dealing with people and there's a disagreement, I always tell them start with competence. There's something they don't know. There's some information they don't have. There's a skill they haven't developed. Start there, right? And then after you've eliminated that as a possibility, then let's move to capacity, right? Maybe you're asking someone to do something they're not capable of doing, right? For whatever reason. They don't have the capacity to do what you're asking them to do, or to think the way you're asking them to think, or to engage the way you're asking them to engage. Only after you have explored those possibilities and tried to remedy those possibilities should you give yourself permission to examine the person's character.
Mm,
You
I
don't get to
love that.
write me off. You don't get to write me off as a person when maybe I just don't know, or maybe I'm just
Right.
not able, right?
Right.
Mhm.
So I think that's so important. And I just see so much right now. The reason we have so much unhealthy conflict is because we go straight for character,
Whew.
Mhm. Yep.
right?
Well,
I agree
and
with
go
Go
ahead,
ahead.
Cecile. No, you go.
Okay, I was gonna say I totally agree with you because when I'm working with people talking about anti-racism, anti-oppression, the first thing I focus on is self-care, getting in your body, and then learning how to hold space for the other person before you have the conversation. Because otherwise,
Right,
everything that you're thinking and feeling, you're gonna bring that and they're gonna feel it and it's gonna mess you up before the words get out of your mouth. So I
right.
love the way you frame that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Right. I
Mhm.
love those three C's: competency, capacity, and character. And
right,
then
Yes.
the one that bubbled up for me is compassion. Like
right,
compassion for ourselves and the other person when we're in a conflict situation.
right,
Um, whether it's a good conflict situation, like we're trying to solve something and, or if it's one that bubbled up from something else. So
right.
you and I
And I
were
think
talking a little bit before about like nonprofit boards, like, whew, like I have served on a bunch of them. And this is where I'm like, how can we get all this information to like everybody?
Well, one way is, I do retreats for boards, and people bring me in to work, and do half day or whole day, just kind of conflict culture development. So yeah, I mean,
I
because
love that.
yeah, yeah,
Will
it's
you
so
tell people
important.
what you have coming up? Because I know you have something exciting coming up that we want to share with our listeners and get the word out about.
Absolutely. So next week, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, I'm doing something called Conquer Conflict and Catapult Your Team. Um, Over the course of those 3 days, it's primarily for leaders, but we lead in all kinds of spaces, right? So I am giving everyone just a quick crash course and exactly what we've talked about: how to change your conflict perspective, how to diffuse existing conflict, and how to kind of have a blueprint to build a healthy conflict culture. And normally, I've done this challenge, I think, 2 times before. I've always charged for it. And I just, from my birthday into the holidays, I've just been in this really giving mood. And so this is the first time I'm doing this for free. Um,
What?
yeah, yes, yes.
Cecile, I was telling her you and I probably need to show up from some of
Right?
the boards we're working
Come
on.
on, come on, come on. Yes, yes. And so, when you register for it, next week you'll get a link to our private both Facebook group and our private Zoom space
Mhm.
where we'll be getting together, and I'll just be pouring in for an hour each evening. Of course, it's interactive. You have to do homework. You have to do the work. Um, you know, but I'm really, really excited about it. And if you want to register for that, you can go to beconflictconfident.com as well. So yeah, www.beconflictconfident.com. And so I'm really excited about it. Every time we do this challenge, my leaders just have quantum leaps. Like their teams love it. I have a practice of working with my leaders before I work with their teams.
Mhm.
So even if I'm coming in to work with the team, even if it's just like a half day kind of, even if it's just an hour, I kind of want to
Mhm.
deal with the leader one on one, because I don't like being in environments where everyone is kind of deflecting, right? And so when you go and you start working with the team and you say something, they'll look at the leader like, well, that's you.
Right.
Right.
This is getting the side eye, right?
Right,
Mhm.
right. So, I like to kind of work with the leader for a little while, make sure that leader is positioned. Um, I'm about empowering leaders, not
Mhm.
undermining leadership.
Right.
So I like,
Ooh,
making sure that that leader is where they need to be to take their team to the next level.
Well, I can
yeah,
totally see how if the leader isn't on board, everybody else can't get on board because they don't feel safe.
Right.
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 Mhm.
Like I don't think you can have a healthy conflict culture with a leader who engages in unhealthy conflict. Like I
Right.
work with mid-level managers
Mhm.
sometimes. And one of the things I work with them on is what I call the bubble concept, which is
Mhm.
where, as a leader, I always think about, like, in the movie The Incredibles, the girl who can, like, put the field around her. And I'm
Right.
like,
Mhm.
that's kind of what you have to do with your team, like, to the extent that you can create this nice little bubble where you all just have this wonderfully productive and harmonious ecosystem, you know, do that. Because it's very difficult to take it beyond you if you have toxic leadership above you.
Mhm.
So yeah.
I love that, Shannon. Thank you so much. We had a conversation a couple of episodes ago with Kate Arms, and we were talking about psychological safety. And it really
Yes.
Mhm.
feels like it kind of all ties in together.
All of it.
Mhm.
All of it.
Oh, this has just been so good and so informative. All right. So, where can folks find you? Before we have a question for you before you go, but folks can find you at, I put it up a second ago, but I want to make sure, is there anywhere else you want them to find you?
I am Shannon L. Felder on every platform.
All
So
right.
if you put Shannon L. Felder in Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, everywhere, I am Shannon L. Felder.
That's awesome. And we will put that
Okay.
in our show notes too, so people can find you. So every
Awesome.
week, well, there's two things we want to ask you.
Okay.
What are your wellness practices that keep you going on a regular basis with this big work that you're doing out here in the world?
Absolutely. Well, I make appointments with myself, and I give them the same honor and integrity I give appointments with others.
Mm.
So, for example, if I've had a hectic week and I've decided that on Saturday I'm going to take a really long nap, and I put the nap down for Saturday afternoon, and you call me and say, "Hey, Shannon, are you busy Saturday afternoon?" I am.
I love that.
Yeah. So that's one of the things, because we set appointments with ourselves and then we break them. Like, are you, well, not really. Why is your appointment to take care of yourself less important than your appointment to have a meeting with someone else? Like, so that's one of the things I do. If I calendar me and I honor my calendar.
Ooh, I love that. I love that. Well, that flows into our next question, because we like to ask every week, we do a wisdom in action. So it's kind of like our hashtag. Like, if you had to
Okay.
hashtag anything about this conversation, what would your wisdom in action be for this week around harnessing conflict management?
I would say, um, don't be afraid to amplify your voice and make every environment you occupy better.
Mm, I love that. Cecile, what would your wisdom in action be?
I like those 3 C's that she talked about along with yours, that competence,
Mhm.
capacity, character, and then what you added, compassion. I
Mhm.
like those. It's like concise and you can remember it, and
Right.
those 4 steps just make such a difference. So yeah.
I'm going to add one C to that for my wisdom in action, and that's change your mindset,
Oh, I like that.
specifically around conflict, right?
Mhm.
Yes.
That not to see it. And I think I have really done that over the last 10 years, but I could tell even when I was talking about, there was still a lingering bit of that, right? So I'm
Right.
Mhm.
so grateful to have this conversation, y'all. Thank you both for
Yeah.
being here and for being a part of this. And
Yes.
Shannon, we will put your info on all our stuff, and just share your work with the world. We're so grateful for what you're doing out there.
Yes. I love it.
Yes.
It was so nice to meet you.
Great meeting you. Great seeing you, Christine. Enjoyed everything with you guys.
Thank you so much. Talk
Thank
to you
you.
soon.
All right.
Oh my goodness, what a fun conversation.
Yes, I love how she just took something that a lot of people, they hear the word conflict and their mind freezes up and their body gets tight, and
Mhm.
she just took it and broke it down and said, you know what? We can do this with compassion, and we can be gentle with ourselves, and we can still
Right.
do this from the top down.
Well, and also I loved where she started with the authenticity piece, like how you
Yes.
have to know yourself, you have to know where the stories
Mhm.
came from,
Mhm.
and be able to, and what I heard her say, I don't know if she said it this way, because it's our language, but to be fully in your body, to be
Yes.
present, to be able to
I don't think she said it
react
that
to
way, but
this,
she meant it. Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And just, yeah, so that was really, that gave me a lot to think about. And
And I love the idea of mid-level management creating a bubble for the
right.
people that they manage. I love that imagery of protecting the people
Oh,
that report to you.
absolutely. Well, and that
Mhm.
offer that she's given the world about conquering conflict.
Girl, you know I'm signing up.
I gotta look at my calendar. I'm a little nervous about it being next week, but I am so looking up and signing up. So,
Mhm.
well, my friend, I am just so grateful for your time and for you being here,
Aw,
and
thank you.
being a woman connected in wisdom with us.
Aw.
And thank you for filling in for Shannon today. And do
Yeah, I
you
hope she
have
feels
anything
better.
upcoming that you want to let folks know about?
Well, yeah, I'll let people know that I am changing my business name to Everyday Activism, and so, gonna be offering, um, instead of the membership, it's gonna be an email I can't even remember what you call it, but people will still be able to join and go through the 4 pillars that they go through with me in the membership. But it's going to arrive directly in your email box, and instead of having to sign up and log in, you're going to be able to click your email and get all the information right there. You'll get like a 20-minute video, and I will take you through the process of learning new self-care technique or getting a good understanding of a concept and tying history to the present and suggestions for ways to put this into your everyday life. How do you work this stuff in? How do you go
Right.
from I learned this information, I'm grounded in my body, and I don't want to go to a protest. We're not asking you to go to a protest. I'm asking you to take this information and use it wherever you take up space so that you can make
Right.
change for the world, and get that delivered directly to your inbox. And you can
I
find me
love
right
that.
now at sacilarmstrong.com.
I love
So
that.
yeah.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you so much
Thanks.
for being here. I
Yeah.
appreciate you. And to all our listeners, whether you listened live or you're listening to us on the recording, we are grateful for you. And until next
Mhm.
week, which this was episode 94, y'all. So next week, Shannon
Wow.
will be back. It'll be episode 95. And until then, be well, be wise, and be
Be
whole.
whole.
We'll see you soon.